Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Anna, and if you're new here on this channel, we talk about all things gaming. We talk about like industry trends, things going on in the gaming community, what games we've been playing lately. Speaking of games I've been playing lately, I finished 2 games this month while still making my way through Octopath Traveler 0. People who watch my videos are probably sick of me talking about that game at this point, but in between this massive JRPG, I decided to pick up 2 indie games this month. I first finished Consume Me, which is largely a solo developer project led by this developer named Jenny. It was one of the games that was nominated at last year's Game Awards, and it was really fun. I thought it was really funny, silly, but also very entertaining. Got through it in just like a few sessions on my Steam Deck. Really great handheld game in my opinion. And then last week I finished Finding Paradise, which is the sequel to the Moon, which was very famous back in the day. I didn't cry when I played it, which I fully expected to, considering that To the Moon made me cry like a baby. I appreciated the story and the overall message, but yeah, I just thought it would hit a little bit harder, and I think I was kind of looking for that kind of emotional experience, which I didn't quite get, but again, still glad that I played it. And now we've made it to the end of the month, and January always feels like simultaneously very long and very short to me every year. Like I feel like it was just New Year's where we were celebrating it being 2026, but then I think, wow, it's still January. Like I can't believe this month is going by so slow. So 2 videos ago when I was talking about my 2026 resolutions when it comes to gaming, I got this comment that was one of the top liked comments from that video that says, I really appreciate the fact that we all just grew up and are like so completely dedicated to making this relationship with gaming work and thrive year after year. And I'm really glad I got this comment because initially when I was making that video, I felt really silly, a little bit self-conscious about taking gaming as a hobby so seriously that I made resolutions around it. Because gaming as a hobby isn't something like fitness, for example, right? Where with fitness, if you really put in the work and are disciplined with exercise, you really reap the benefits and see the results at the end of that. So I just felt like a little bit self-conscious, thinking like, wow, I am really taking gaming so seriously that I built these resolutions around it. But it seemed like a lot of people actually did resonate with trying to take gaming more seriously in that way and be more intentional about it. And the reason why I personally take gaming more seriously in that capacity is because it's just simply a hobby that makes me happy. And it took my whole adult life post grad to realize how important it is to stay engaged in the hobbies that make me happy. And the more that I put into hobbies that make me happy, the more benefits I reap from it. I know it sounds transactional when you put it that way, but that's as simple as I can think of it in terms of like why I want to put my focus and energy into a hobby like this. But the thing with gaming as an adult that I think a lot of people who are probably watching this relate to, considering that more than half of my audience are in that 25 to 34 age range, that despite knowing that hobbies like gaming makes us happy, it is so hard to actively and consistently engage with it. You know, we all experience burnout with like life and work and just responsibilities as a adult human. Sometimes it feels like booting up a game takes up way too much energy and it feels like a tedious task rather than something enjoyable. I definitely have days like that, even despite being a gaming content creator myself. Some days I just want to lay in bed and read webtoons all day or just scroll mindlessly on social media because it's just the easier task. Not only that, but if you watch my last vlog, you know that I celebrated my birthday recently and I'm well into my 30s now, and now I'm starting to doubt in the first place spending my time so much gaming in the first place, because now I'm thinking about things like how I'm a biological clock, thinking about things like marriage and just like other things that are going on in my life that make me feel, wow, I really am in my final years of doing whatever the fuck that I want until I can't. So I just have some growing insecurities about growing up and staying engaged with the things that kept me happy throughout my childhood, my adolescence, and my 20s, basically my whole life. And with the growing responsibilities I have as an adult in their 30s now, sometimes I lament the days where I was gaming as a kid or like a teenager, because I think about that magical feeling we all felt when we were gaming as a younger person. That magical feeling being, for example, when I was playing MMORPGs for 12 hours a day in the summer and not really having a care in the world, or real responsibilities outside of that and having that kind of nostalgic fondness thinking about those times. Just playing with online friends or like playing your first Zelda game for the first time and feeling that kind of whimsy and being immersed in a fantasy world, playing your first Pokemon game for the first time and feeling that attachment to your Pokemon and your party and genuinely caring for your Pokemon as they level and evolve and get stronger. I think we all have different ways on how that magic existed in our childhood when it comes to games. But now, like I said, as an adult with responsibilities, I sometimes start to think things like, will I have that feeling I felt gaming as a kid again as an adult? Will I have those kind of like magical, whimsical moments with gaming again that I felt like was more acutely felt when I was younger? So I started to think more on this desire, this obsession with chasing this feeling that gaming gave us when we were kids. If you guys follow me on platforms like TikTok or Instagram or watch my YouTube shorts, I just started this series where I explore libraries in the LA County to look for the best video game catalogs because I'm trying to rent games more from the library. So I'm just like trying to find the best libraries to do that. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with this series because I just like visiting new places, exploring libraries, and making an afternoon out of it. So while I'm doing this series, I'm actually borrowing more books and DVDs from the library as well, because one of my non-gaming related resolutions is just to read more again. So visiting my first library for the series, I decided to rent out The Catcher in the Rye, which was a book that I really did not care for in high school. It was required reading for me, and I remember not giving a shit about it at all. I remember thinking that the book was extremely boring and irrelevant to my life, and I didn't really see value reading this book during school. And I decided that this book was going to be one of the first books that I rent out and reread because one, I forgot everything about it. I really only remember the main character, but I literally did not remember anything else that happened in the book. And two, my partner really likes this book, so I was like, okay, if he really likes it, there must be something in this book that I missed the first time that I'm sure I'll come to appreciate. And three, which is probably the most important reason, I felt like I can probably appreciate this book a lot better now as someone with a lot more life experience, more open-mindedness, more patience compared to when I was a student in high school. The reason why I bring this up is because I think my willingness to go back and reread some of the classics, reread required reading back in school, despite remembering that I hated this piece of literature back then, highlights that our thoughts on media, art, stories we consumed will be formed based on who we are as people when we consume those things, influenced by factors like all types of life experiences we have up to that point, naturally growing to be a little bit more open-minded and patient as we grow older, having our frontal lobe developed after 25 and feeling like we have a little bit more critical thinking capacity to our brains. So to put it in simple terms, in this example, I'm really just saying that my thoughts and opinions on this book, The Catcher in the Rye, is undoubtedly going to be different from how I felt about the book back in high school because I'm just a different person now. And this made me think about this perspective with the games that I play. I just mentioned at the beginning of this video that I finished a game called Consume Me, and I don't think that I would have appreciated this game nearly as much before high school. I think if I played it as a kid, I would have appreciated probably the addictive type of gameplay it has, but I don't think I would have been perceptive to the kind of social commentary it has, the kind of themes and messages that it carries, and personally relating to the game myself. For those who aren't familiar with this game, it's a semi-autobiographical story about Jenny going through high school and all the anxieties and responsibilities that a typical high school student probably goes through. So she deals with dating her first boyfriend and how to juggle that with college apps. She has an Asian mother who frequently comments about her weight. She's self-conscious about her body weight goals and dieting. But what I actually thought was really cool about this game is that on the surface, it seems like a very silly and humorous game, and it seems very unserious with the gameplay it has, kind of like in this WarioWare minigame style. But it actually has very interesting social commentary towards the topics that it addresses. So there's this whole minigame dedicated to feeding Jenny, and it's literally this Tetris style game where you have to fit the blocks in the right places to make sure that Jenny is under her calorie count goal, but also is full for the rest of the day. And if you don't optimize that, it affects all her other tasks too, like having enough energy to study or do errands. And in a way, this gameplay is a commentary on toxic dieting culture that people like Jenny had to go through when she was in high school. It definitely reminded me of when I was a teenager and I had immense stress over applying to colleges while going through some of the worst depression of my life, of going through my first relationship. The game also does a really good job of actually making you feel a little bit anxious too about hitting all your goals and your to-do list with the limited time you have, because that's just the mechanic in the game. And you start to realize, I don't have enough time to do all of these things. How am I supposed to avoid game over when I have to do all these errands for mom and study for my exam coming up and still make time for my boyfriend? The game is like a cool reflection of the feelings that Jenny must have gone through during that time of her life, while simultaneously reminded me of the stress that I definitely felt during that same era too. My favorite narrative game that I played last year that I will never shut up about is a game called 1000 Times Resist. And when I played this game really hit me like a truck. I felt like it was extremely relevant to my life and the things that were happening in the world, and something that I think I will appreciate forever for existing. And I'm really grateful that I played it at the time that I played it. 1000 Times Resist has a lot of stories and topics that it kind of tackles, but just to include a few, it talks about Asian diaspora and how the police brutality and government crackdowns during the 2019 Hong Kong protests drove this family out to Canada and learning how to assimilate into the country, facing microaggressions as people of color. It talks about how that is only a part of the generational trauma that happens between this toxic mother and daughter relationship, a global pandemic that causes human extinction, and this is only a few years after 2020. So as you can probably imagine, as an Asian daughter of an immigrant family living in America during 2020. Yeah, this game hit really hard, and I felt like it was representation in games on another level to play through this experience with the identity that I have. So Anna, get to the point. There's things that we associated with gaming back then when we were kids that had this magic to it. Worlds where we can fully immerse ourselves with really no real responsibilities. Maybe we had less cynical perspectives on games and not think so much about the quality of what we were playing back when we were just children. But because games are also an art form and a storytelling medium, there are games that you can appreciate better with age too. Growing up doesn't always have to take away from gaming. Your life experiences you gain will help you better understand and interpret games, stories, books, media, art, which is a part of growing up you can learn to appreciate. I've had this perspective shift of learning to appreciate what growing up grants me when consuming things like games, rather than thinking my experience with it will diminish in quality because of it. And this experience will only change and evolve over time. I'll learn to appreciate things differently as I myself change. Like, I can see myself really appreciating games in a completely different way if I ever have a kid, for example, and I share all my favorite childhood games with them. And this doesn't always have to do with appreciating just the stories that exist in games either. One of the first things that comes to mind is definitely technology. I've talked about this before, but one of the things that I don't take for granted when it comes to being born in the 90s and growing up with gaming is being able to exist during this time where there was this rapid technological advancement and we saw it in games. So being able to say that my first couple games was like Dr. Mario on the Super Nintendo or the first Pokemon games on the Game Boy. Thinking about what games we started with makes it easier to appreciate what kind of games that we have now. Like when I played Baldur's Gate 3 for the first time, I couldn't believe how much work went into that game, all the things that were possible in a game like that. And I do think that because I started out with games that were much more primitive, I'm able to appreciate games in the modern age so much more. I also think about all the art that goes into a game. Like many people who were looking for new hobbies to get into during the COVID quarantine lockdowns, I tried learning how to draw and realized it was one of the hardest hobbies that I have ever tried in my life. And I just had so much respect for people who actually knew art and how to draw, because my God, it felt like the hardest thing in the world. I also think about how there's so much better representation in games now. Like I said, a story like 1000 Times Resist, I wouldn't have imagined a story like that really existing in a game back then. In recent years, I feel like voice acting is definitely something that I appreciate so much more. I think this is felt across the whole industry, the whole gaming community. I think voice acting is so much more celebrated now than it was back then. You think about people like Ben Starr and Jennifer English and Neil Newbon, these very popular voice actors that really elevate the gaming experience. I mean, games back then didn't even have the capacity to support legitimate acting. We started out with like super campy dialogue coming out of like polygon characters, and it wasn't until technology got better that obviously the acting started getting better as well. When I went to the Expedition 33 panel at last year's PAX, I walked out feeling so much more respect towards the mocap actors. It was really cool to see the behind the scenes of how mocap actors really have to convey the personality of the character despite not voicing them. I definitely think that that is something that is to be celebrated more in the industry, because we have a lot of emphasis on voice actors, but there's so much that goes into mocap acting now too in games. And I think that should definitely be its own category at the Game Awards. After working at a game studio myself, one of the things that I think about constantly is game direction and game design. Like something that I think about now when I play like turn-based games, for example, I think about like, how do people like calculate damage numbers or calculate stats when you level up, the buffs that you get when you equip a new piece of armor, or designing skills that doesn't break the game or make it too unbalanced. These are all things that I've grown to be a lot more conscious of, obviously after working at a studio, but also just like I think I didn't give a single thought to when I was just playing games as a kid, and are very specific unsung things that are still so important to a game, you know? And finally, I think about community a lot when it comes to playing games as an adult. After I graduated college, one of the things that I started doing a lot more of is going to tournaments and esports events myself and connecting with the people there, either going with my friends or meeting new people at those events. And I really thank myself for doing this when I was in my early 20s, because I think community is one of those things that just gets harder over time. While you're in school, you obviously have so much access to community. You can join school clubs or just meet people in your dorm, and you just have access to people. And we all know how much harder that becomes once we become working adults. I pretty often go to like fighting game tournaments, and I love seeing people who are older than me still attend these events and still continue to be a staple in the community decades later, even after they've started a family, gotten married, had kids. Because I do think that these kind of people understand how important it is to keep up with these communities. I also think that gaming communities like the fighting game community remind me and reassure me that it is important to support and stick with these communities even after you've grown up, because everybody who is also your age is still doing the same thing too. As a side note, I think reflecting on all of these things that I just mentioned have definitely helped me get over this like insecurity of being in my 30s still and playing games, especially considering like games and grassroots events and all these things that revolve around gaming were created by people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Kojima's in his 60s now. We all know he's playing games. And it's funny that until you become a creative yourself, it's a little bit embarrassing to just be like an gamer fan. Anyways, what the fuck is the point of this video? I'm gonna continue keeping up with this hobby that makes me happy until it stops making me happy. And I'm gonna try my hardest to not put arbitrary pressure on myself to enjoy it a certain way, just because I'm getting a little bit older. That's pretty much all I had to say on this topic. I know it was kind of all over the place, but if you have any thoughts, I would love to read them in the comments below as always. And until then, I will see you in the next video. Games are political, and if you don't think so, you might just lack critical thinking. I just talked about how 1000 Times to Resist involves a story about a family being driven out to Canada due to government and police brutality during the Hong Kong protests. Cloud from Final Fantasy VII is part of an eco-terrorist organization that is fighting against the government to save the planet. A man goes on a journey to become king in a kingdom where he faces discrimination in every part of the land. Do I even need to explain this one? Like other forms of storytelling and art, these games exist for you to care about their real life applications. So if you care about any of these games or similar ones, their characters, their stories, their messages, which I know for a fact my community does care about, you would know the importance of fighting against the injustices that we have the power to stand up against. I'm calling to action 2 things for my community. 1, to make a difference in the movement to abolish ICE and prevent them from further threatening, terrorizing, and murdering our neighbors and people in our local communities. I've left links below providing organizations to donate to, resources on how to email email or call your representatives, and other ways to support this cause. 2, to read up on the atrocities happening in Iran right now and take action against the mass murder of protesters, families, and civilians committed by the brutal regime. I've also provided links on how to support here and how to generally spread awareness, as the communication blackouts have suppressed information going out about this. Thanks to you guys watching my channel, I was able to donate this month's YouTube revenue towards these organizations, which I will point towards in terms of additional resources and places to donate. Again, I appreciate you all for watching through this very important message.